To folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border, do not come.
I'm responsible for the decisions that I make. I'm responsible for the actions of the State Department. We made the right decision in ending America's longest war.
We don't own our own gas supply or oil supply. And so the market is what the market is. Presidents don't control the cost of gasoline.
Why aren't school employees, public school employees, going back to work?
I don't have an answer for you. I mean, I'd like to, if I had that answer, I'd be giving it all day today.
Are we addressing the Chief of Staff's Twitter habits? Yes. It is not a top priority.
Well, it's just a taste of what the administration has been dealing with on a host of different fronts. As you take a look at this graphic here, you can see each one of the members of the administration, from the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, with the high-class problems tweet, Vice President Harris and the border crisis, Secretary of State on the Afghanistan testimony and the situation, the Attorney General about the parents as domestic terrorists, the Labor Secretary on you just saw the labor shortage. We heard from Secretary Buttigieg, the Transportation Secretary on the supply chain issues, the Secretary of Energy on the gas prices, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security on the border disaster and the crisis there, and the Secretary of Education dealing with critical race theory and other questions. It's a lot. Let's bring in our panel. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, also author of the new book, Rigged: How the Media, Big Tech, and the Democrats Seized Our Elections. Juan Williams is a Fox News analyst, and Morgan Ortagus, former State Department spokesperson. You know, when you put it in that frame, Morgan, and you were in an administration, and sometimes you have bad weeks or a couple of bad weeks, but each one of those is a significant issue that this administration is dealing with.
Yeah, at some point, though, you have to get out of the bubble. And this administration has not yet been able to get out of the bubble. And it really, I think, is endemic of a crisis of leadership, right? Really, if you ask the American people who's in charge, right, they don't see Joe Biden as being a leader if you look at all of the polling. And they don't see the vice president either standing up and leading on the positions that she said she was going to. And if you look at poll after poll, like Quinnipiac, for example, just 25% of Americans are approving of how the president is handling the border. And then you check out at the grocery store, and your groceries are a lot more expensive than they were a year ago or 6 months ago. So I don't think it's one thing. It's everything that you laid out in the beginning. And the White House and this administration needs to get themselves out of the bubble and realize it's not the commentators on other cable news channels that determine whether they get reelected or whether they're doing a good job. They answer to the American people. The American people are hurting. They're having a hard time filling up their gas tank. They're worried about inflation. They're worried about the price of groceries. And they know that there is a border situation that this administration really has no honest intention of solving anytime soon.
One, Secretary Buttigieg earlier, I was talking about this infrastructure bill, the bipartisan one that is up there. Speaker Pelosi has not put it for a vote. Moderates would like her to. Take a listen. Why not move the infrastructure bill that has that in it that the House hasn't voted on? Because the other bill is still being negotiated and debated between Democrats.
Well, we're for both of those bills. I'm a transportation secretary. I'm also a new father. And I believe that the president's overall vision of making sure that this is a country where it's affordable to raise a family, and making sure that we're supporting Americans with health care, and making sure that we deliver on these infrastructure needs, all of these things fit together.
Juan, I went at it about 3 different times. They don't need Republicans to pass these things. They could put it on and take the bird in the hand, take the win, take the W, and the Secretary of Transportation could have better bridges and ports and airports.
All true. I think it's very important here to say, Republicans aren't being supportive. They were supportive on the infrastructure bill, but not on the social infrastructure bill that's pending. So you have a division among Democrats, and you have one segment of the Democrats using that bill as leverage to make sure that they get the social infrastructure that they want.
Yeah, but Juan, you don't need Republicans, right?
You
just reconciliation, you could pass the whole thing. You don't need them.
That's what I said. That's why I said that right now you have divisions among the Democrats, Britt, and what they want to do is use one part, the part that's already sitting there, passed by a bipartisan group in the Senate, as leverage to ensure that they get that social safety net or social infrastructure part passed. I just wanted to add quickly, though, that I think a lot of this kind of carping at the Biden administration ignores, this week we had such good news, the lowest number of unemployment claims since the pandemic began, GDP at 6%. I think that's the highest in like 40 years. The stock market right now, it's at near record highs. It's hit records for the 50 times already this year. I think the American people are aware of supply chain backups, but they're also aware of the pandemic. And a lot of that's global. It's not caused by anything that we as Americans or Joe Biden has done.
Yeah, I mean, there are some good signs that you mentioned there, but the unemployment number, there's a lot of people that are out of the workforce on that one. Gallup, Molly, the question was, government, is it doing too much? Preferences for government activity, doing too much or should do more? And you look at these numbers, doing too much is now leading exponentially from year over year. And at the same time, Democrats are pushing these trillion-dollar bills up on the Hill.
I think one of the big disconnects is people know that the federal government is wanting to do a lot of things, and what they're doing is failing at a lot of things. You look at all of these issues that you brought up at the beginning, whether it's the debacle of the incompetence of how we exited Afghanistan, a completely open border as a result of the policies of the Biden administration, and then when you want to have a frank and open talk about what everybody in the country realizes is a suffering economy, you have a transportation secretary who sits there and tries to say that actually the economy is doing quite well, whereas normal Americans know that that's not the case, and that the federal government, ostensibly in charge of some of these things, is doing a bad job of managing supply chains or other issues that are leading to empty shelves, skyrocketing prices, and they don't seem to be taking it seriously. And the less they take it seriously, and it's not just Biden, but all of these cabinet officials, the less they take it seriously, the more anxiety it gives average Americans because they realize they're not taking it seriously.
We're going to have to drop winners and losers because just a few seconds ago, President Biden was walking into the residence and he was asked about the investigation into January 6th up on Capitol Hill. And he said that the Justice Department should prosecute those who refused to testify. And again, there are a number of people who've already signaled that, like Steve Bannon, not testifying. He's saying, the president, that they should be prosecuted by the DOJ.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.